but I visited every member in the church. It was a smallish church. It was maybe 150 people or households. And over the course of 3 years, I visited everyone. And uh, there was great healing that happened. In fact, people who had kept quiet about their own struggles because they didn't think Christians got depressed, or they didn't think Christians should talk about, emotional pain like we do our physical pain. Um, but a lot of people like that came back to church, and the church actually thrived.
Hey everyone, and welcome. I am Morgan Gis McDonald, founder CEO of Paper Raven Books, and I have with us today a super special guest who is launching his book that's titled When Despair Meets Delight: Stories to Cultivate Hope for Those Battling Mental Illness. He's also the founder and chief shepherd of When Despair Meets Delight Ministries, which is a Christian ministry for those who are struggling with mental illness. Tony Roberts, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Morgan.
We are super excited because we're running a promotion on your book, When Despair Meets Delight. And we were just talking about this before we kind of hit record and started this conversation, but you want to bring to the conversation about mental illness a message of hope, a message of lifelong healing, a message of encouragement. So can you tell us a little bit more about, for anyone who's interested in this book, what is this book about? Who did you write it for?
Thank you, Morgan, for this opportunity. This is a book that is a memoir of someone with a mental illness, namely me. And it's also a model for mental health ministry. I have witnessed in my own personal journey hope that has allowed me to live with a serious mental illness, namely bipolar disorder. And I have worked with people in ministry and beyond, family members, friends, strangers alike, people on psych units who have very significant diagnoses, sometimes giving up hope. And I'm convinced that there is hope. You mentioned, healing, maybe not healing in the conventional sense of a cure, but healing that is a process of getting better and celebrating each moment that comes.
And can you maybe tell us a little bit about your story? Because I mean, as you said, this is a memoir. This is sort of stories, about battling mental illness, and you have quite a journey with that yourself. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your own story?
Sure. Often people with bipolar are diagnosed at a young age. I had symptoms. I had some visions and voices as early as high school. But I was actually a model student. I was voted the top scholar athlete in my high school. So the debilitating symptoms didn't hit me until I was already in my career as a pastor. I was 30. I had children who were 2 years old and not even a year old yet. And because of the stress of being in a new career, being a husband, a father, the financial burdens of having student loans and not being in a lucrative field, all of these combined, and also just my genes caught up with me, my body chemistry didn't hold out. So I had a medication-induced psychotic episode while I was trying to treat depression, that caused me to land in the hospital, where I got my diagnosis at the age of 30. One of the nurses, who was kind of an old crotchety, uh, not very hopeful, gave me a very bleak prognosis. She said that I would be divorced, that I would not never work in ministry again, and that I would be in and out of psych units the rest of my life. Um,
When you were 30 years old,
when I was
just
30
finding
years
out.
old, that was her hope for me. um, Fortunately, at that same hospital, I had the director of the psychiatry, Dr. Hazlett is his name. I'll never forget him. Uh, he handed me a book by a woman named Kay Redfield Jameson, who is the director of psychiatric research at Johns Hopkins, and she also has bipolar disorder. And she had just written her memoir, and he told me to read it. And I was immediately had hope. I didn't think I would ever be a Johns Hopkins researcher, but I thought, at the very least, I could have a meaningful career and repair the relationships that were challenged by this very debilitating disease.
Yeah. So, and you were in ministry full time, and how did that affect your relationship with God and with the congregation? What did that start to look like for you?
That's an excellent question. It really had a great impact. For me personally, as I uh, processed what was happening to me, I, on the one hand, had a struggle because, as many Christians, I believe that God speaks to me in ways maybe not verbally or audibly, but through my thoughts and emotions and what other people say to me. And so part of what I thought God was saying to me was actually a religious delusion. So I was having to sort through that, and I had to start screening what all those things that I thought God was saying through trusted Christian friends and elders and scripture, certainly, make sure it checked out. Um, on the other hand, as a pastor and a leader, there were people, some treated me with kid gloves. They really, they cared for me, and I appreciate that, but they didn't give me the opportunity to continue to serve them as a pastor, because they thought that I was too fragile. And then a few people, not many, but there were a few people who felt that just having the diagnosis was like being demonic possessed.
Whoa.
And because of that, they drifted away from the church. Um, the elders and I made a priority, once I was able to get back to work, and it took a good 6 months to a year for me to get back full time. But I visited every member in the church. It was a smallish church. It was maybe 150 people or households. And over the course of 3 years, I visited everyone. And uh, there was great healing that happened. In fact, people who had kept quiet about their own struggles because they didn't think Christians got depressed, or they didn't think Christians should talk about, emotional pain like we do our physical pain. Um, but a lot of people like that came back to church, and the church actually thrived.
That's a great story.
Thank you.
I mean, that gives you hope. It's like I imagine it took an enormous amount of courage for you to go and visit each household, especially when, how do you start? You're still starting to like trust yourself again,
Right.
and now you're putting yourself into uncomfortable, unusual situations. And like, you've really got to sort of say, like, God, take care of this.
Yes.
It's hugely
It was challenging, and I will say this: the one of the miracles of this time in my life is the support that I received from that church and the elders. And it was a connectional church, which meant, like denominational. So there were churches related to it. But everything from, extraordinary bills were paid, child care was provided so my wife could visit, meals. I don't think we fixed a meal for a month or more. It was really, some people refer to mental illness as the no casserole illness, because people are sometimes uncomfortable asking about, how so and so is doing who has depression and they're in the psych unit. But I think because we modeled that we were going to be open about this and we're not going to hide it, I think people were ready to pour out those gifts, but it was still nothing short of a miracle.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So inside the book, Tony, inside of, When Despair Meets Delight, what are you hoping that people sort of come away with when they're in the pages of the book? What do you hope that they see or understand or realize through the book?
Well, I've talked so much about church. Let me back up and also talk to someone who is an agnostic or an atheist, because, a lot of my friends now that I'm not a pastor, I'm more of a mental health minister and friend, advocate, uh, have trouble believing in God and are angry with God, or Christians. They're, angry at the history of Christianity, which does say things like, mental illness is demon possession. What you'll find in my book is a very honest struggle of someone, myself and others that I know and that I've worked with, to make sense of faith, and to find in such things as the Psalms, deep reflections on, I had a sermon once called Mad, Sad, Glad, and Afraid. And, these powerful emotions that, oftentimes in the church, we only sort of put forth a little happiness. If you're happy and it, clap your hands. We don't, I changed that to say, if you're mad and it, stomp your feet or something. And the Bible is rich in metaphors and in emotions. And sometimes for those of us with mental illness, our emotions get the best of us, and they pour forth in rage and, God forbid, violence. but it happens. Um, and but also on the on the plus side, there's also deep passion for faith and for God, and jubilation and praise, and you know uh, all of these things make up for uh, a complete person, and scripture and the an honest reading of church history and the church heroes of the faith um, tells us and shows us that there is all of uh, our hearts, minds, and emotions, and our bodies and our spirits, and all of these things are included in what God wants of us.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I hadn't sort of pulled it together, but I mean, I imagine it would be a difficult position for you to be both open about, struggling with mental illness and openly Christian, and you're sort of getting it from all sides to some extent, right? You might be getting sort of there's a lingering Christian perspective of, if God's taking care of you, you should just, be #blessed.
Yes.
And if you're, from the agnostic perspective, you're thinking, well, why would you even choose to be Christian? Just go and like get your meds and get happy that way. Like, so it's like there's this whole swirling of assumptions and perceptions, and it's like no matter where you are in your conversation, you kind of have to like feel out like, okay, how can I meet this person where they are? So I'm curious, Tony, so now you founded this ministry,
Mm-hmm.
Around When Despair Meets Delight. How I guess I'm sorry. That's the title of the book is When Despair Meets Delight. And in fact, guys, if you guys are watching with us, you can grab a free copy today. Go to paperravenbooks.com/When Despair Meets Delight, all one word. It's linked up to next to this video. It'll take you over to Amazon. You can grab a free copy of the ebook, load it up on your Kindle. If you're going to read it this weekend or next, go ahead and get it loaded up while it's free today. If you want to hear more about Tony's stories and how he's navigated, with bipolar through ministry, through life, it's a very hopeful, encouraging read. So go ahead and grab that while you're here and while you're listening to us. And then you've also founded Delight and Disorder Ministries. How do you serve people in that ministry?
Well, that began through the first book that I wrote 7 years ago, or let's see, it's been 8 now, 2014, March of 2014, called Delight in Disorder. And I have it's evolved through my writing. I have a blog that I publish on almost always twice a week. I publish spiritual reflections and mental health ministry stories, and my own stories, and those that I know. So that's at delightindisorder.org. And then I have a Facebook group page called Hope for Troubled Minds. And this is a community page where people can submit inspiring art or songs, or pose challenging questions of faith. I'm not the only administrator. I have others who are involved. We have about 563 members, I think, now. And out of that, I am developing a third book that I may be working with you on as well. um, and that's going to be called Hope for Troubled Minds. Um, and this will be love letters from people with brain illnesses like the classic bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and schizoaffective disorder, and their loved ones. The people who love someone with a brain illness are often impacted as much or greater than someone with a brain illness. And I've always sort of implicitly known this, seen how people went through my own times of despair. Um, uh, but I'm finding that oftentimes these folks are very eager to receive care and ministry.
And it's interesting because you're sort of we're doing this bigger, wider promotion of When Despair Meets Delight now, and we're kind of feeling ourselves begin to come out of this COVID period. And what people are talking a lot more about now is, now that a lot of the physical dangers are kind of subsiding, people are realizing, holy moly, we're coming out of this period where maybe people already had, you know, some sort of mental illness struggle, and it started to bubble up to the surface when circumstances changed so drastically, or maybe even like an onset happened
Yes.
during this event. Have you noticed anything like in the last couple of years it's changed in kind of mental illness, sort of in a broader cultural conversation?
It certainly has aggravated the mental health. Well, I should say in many cases it has aggravated mental health concerns for those that need to come out of isolation. Um, Interestingly, some had commented to me, especially early on in the pandemic, that it was almost like a breath of fresh air because they were no longer challenged to get out of their comfort zone. They could, you know, there are all these avenues like what we're seeing right now, what you and I are doing, for some form of contact that fell just short of face to face. When all is said and done and they count up the toll of suicide, you know, mental health, disability, you know, there's kind of a hidden cost to what seemed to be the right choice at the time, or the best choice, maybe the only choice, but there is a cost.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do believe that this is a very good time to be putting out your message about, you know, being honest about the struggle of mental illness, and in your case, the bipolar, but I imagine a lot of it would carry over for people who are struggling with different types of mental illness. And also, you know, a very transparent conversation about faith and what it looks like to kind of hold both of these things, to hold, you know, a lifetime of really healing, but also, you know, great delight in faith, you know, as the title would hint at. So guys, if you're feeling like that's the kind of conversation that you want to be a part of, then you're in the right place. And you can grab a free copy of Tony's book, When Despair Meets Delight. paperravenbooks.com/When Despair Meets Delight. All one word. It's linked up next to this video. They'll take you to Amazon. You can grab a free copy of the ebook right now. If you know someone who also struggles with mental illness, or maybe they love someone who struggles with mental illness and would be encouraged by stories like this, then please tag them or send them the link. And this is a time to really get this message out, because it's something that we're ready, I think, to talk about more openly, and to be more inclusive, and to be more hopeful, and to be more supportive of each other. So thank you for writing this book.
Thank you for the opportunity, Morgan.
Yeah. Any last words, Tony, for your readers who might be diving into your book this weekend? Anything that you hope that they walk away with?
I just want to say that I think, we no longer have the luxury to stay hidden. Um, if there's one thing we've learned in the pandemic is that we are best when we are honest, and that means honest with our faith, honest with our feelings, um, and it's just not good to stay in hiding.
Yeah, time to come out and have some real conversations. Well, thank you for providing the book that can be good fodder for those honest, frank, transparent, healing conversations. And folks, grab a copy, paperravenbooks.com/when despair meets delight. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.